Podcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining our webinar today. And I should say good morning, depending on what part of the country you are joining us from. My name is Lee Manley. I'm Senior Director of District Partnerships, and I'm your host and co-presenter for today's webinar. I am pleased to welcome Dr. Beverly Carbaugh, who, along with Dr. Robert Marzano, authored the new Marzano Focused Leader Evaluation Model, which we will learn more about today. Our webinar today is scheduled for just shy of an hour. We will spend the majority of time introducing you to the new Marzano Focused Leader Evaluation Model, and I'll also go into iObservation briefly. That's the online portal that operationalizes the process for schools and districts, and it makes things a whole lot easier on administrators and observers especially. But before we start, I have a few helpful reminders for today's webinar. First, your audio lines are muted during the presentation. However, we welcome your questions and comments. You may do so by using the GoToWebinar question pane located on your screen. You will also find a copy of the slides, a map of the model, and a very informative white paper on the model. Finally, today's webinar will be recorded with a link distributed to you via email. Please feel free to share the presentation with colleagues who were unable to attend. So with that, I will turn it over to Dr. Carbaugh, who will introduce us to the Marzano Focused School Leader Model.
Thank you, Lee, and my name is Beverly Carbaugh, and I am actually talking to you today from a very wet and humid Tampa, Florida. We're kind of sad down here in Tampa today because last night our hockey team lost Game 7 of the Eastern Conference Finals. A lot of people think it's strange to have a big hockey town in South Florida, but we're big hockey fans down here. So, and if you out there in the audience are hockey fans, I'm sure you feel our pain. But anyway, we are so excited to have you. This is a very well-attended webinar, and we're talking about an exciting subject, school leadership. So, unfortunately, it's not an interactive call because you get a couple hundred people on. It's very hard to open up the phone line. So, I will kind of be that talking head. I'm going to talk with you and hopefully lay some groundwork about why there was an update to the model, and then I'll actually introduce you to the model. So why in the world did we decide that the school evaluation model needed an update? Well, the very first and the primary reason was that the new national standards were updated in late 15, early 16, and we actually needed to respond to those. Many states require that you have very close alignment. So we have updated so that we align very clearly and very tightly with those new professional leader standards. Now, the leader standards nationally are a lot more comprehensive. They have at least 10 domains, and under every domain, there's anywhere from 15 to 20 indicators. This is a focus, is a much tighter model than that big comprehensive or granular model that really gets at lots and lots of detailed behaviors. Because if you think about an evaluation model, it should really focus on key indicators, key performance indicators, not on every action that a school leader would make. So you're going to, when we roll out the model in a few more slides, you're going to notice it really is focused on what research shows are key performance indicators. The other reason, it's right there on your screen, one of our beliefs at Learning Sciences Marzano Center, where we work on teacher leader effectiveness and we gather our research through the evaluation process, is evaluation should not be static. I know as a former school leader, as a former person who evaluated school leaders, we often were evaluated by instruments that were 15, 20 years old, not quite as relevant. So one of the commitments that we've made at the center is to keep evaluation updated. Let it be not become static, but let it be responsive to new research, be responsive to lessons learned from the field. And this model, what you're going to see if you're currently using our school leader model, or if you're interested in using this model, is that one of the lessons that we've learned is that we actually needed a broader evidence base. We have evidences, which I will show you. And the other piece that's actually been expanded in this focus model is more attention to some of the management functions. And you actually see that in the national standards also. But the best part is the research base has not changed, and I will show you that in just a minute, the basic research that undergirds and supports this model. But the research hasn't changed. What has changed is some compacting. Nothing went away if you can't find things, if you're in the process, if you've used the prior model and you're looking at this. Anything that you don't see is probably embedded within the evidence base instead of being one of those elements or key performance indicators. So the next slide that I always like to ask as I'm working on evaluation, can evaluation systems actually help a system to align and focus their work? So think about that. Could a school leader model help focus the work in a school? And if you use the district leader model and you use teacher model, you can see how it could really totally align. But here's the best part about when Bob and I wrote the original model and worked on it, that we wrote the model and this update so that they could actually work with any teacher evaluation system. So we call it model agnostic. But even if you're using, if it's the only component of our evaluation models that you use, it can still help align the work, because we'll look at a slide in just a minute that talks about the influence of the leader. And the leader of a school is a powerful influencer and really the leading indicator of what's going to happen with teacher behavior. So we believe that this model is very viable and can really help align the work in a district and in a school, because the district, their role is to support schools. So if you have a highly functional school leader model, it should pull everybody above and below and around together to focus on the same work. The next slide that I've asked to be in this little webinar is one of my favorite quotes. Because sometimes we leaders, people are like, well, you know, is there research out there to show that your job really matters? Well, if you read this quote, which I'm not going to read to you, I'm actually going to jump down to the bottom of it. But, you know, there are a lot of variables in schools, and it's really hard to control for variables in school. So when you really dig down through all the layers of schooling, the things that impact student learning the most, we all know the first is teacher. But beyond that, the next is the leader of the school. So if you think about it, that's a very heavy duty responsibility, because teacher's only responsible for those 25, 30 kids in the classroom. That school leader then is responsible for every kid in the school. So it's a huge responsibility, and this model is built with that premise that the school leader is responsible for student achievement. So we will dig a little more deeply into how that actually works when we roll out the map. But there's a critical question on the next slide that a lot of people debate. They say, hey, Bev, since principals, we don't directly teach kids, how do we lead those kinds of improvements that impact student achievement at my school? So I always say, think about it. Who do you most directly impact? Your impact on students is really indirect, because all of your work is actually mitigated through your teachers. So as the school leader, there are some critical things that you have to, you're responsible for through your teachers. You have to hire them, motivate them, monitor them, develop them, so that they, who are the most direct link to the students actually move that student achievement. But it's so tightly coupled that it's very exciting to have a model that really addresses, and most of the outcomes are how well are you functioning as a school leader with your teachers. So let's look at the next slide, which I always like to put this in here because there's this is a statistical model. This is based on it's really statistics around leadership, and it's very much, if you look at the role of a district leader, you look at the role of a school leader, and I'm going to walk you through this. So if you have a district leader that will say that functions at the 50th percentile, remember this is a statistical model, so this would be an average district leader. If you have an average school leader and you have an average teacher, what would you expect the predicted achievement gain for students who entered the class or the school at the 50th percentile? Well, you wouldn't have a gain. And some people say, oh, that's terrible. Well, it's not. It really says that you're not going forward, but you're not going backward. But if you want to move down to what I'm going to say into those more highly effective ranges, and looking at the old statistical terms of standard deviations and so forth, if you have a district leader who is their averages at the 84th percentile in performance, which means they're performing considerably above the group that's the average, and you have principals at the same way, you still control for the teacher, look at the predicted achievement gains for your students. You're going to see students start really making achievement gains. Then if you move at that last line, which I like to call those exceeding expectations, the high performing school leaders, you still control for the teacher the influence of leadership on students. The predicted gains over time is 17 percentile points. Now you notice I say over time, that's not going to be in a week, might not even be in a year, but this is the power of leadership. So let's look at the next. If we're looking at actually the research model, this is still the research base that's in place. This comes out of Marzano, Walters, and McNulty's School Leadership That Works book, those 21 responsibilities. And even though there's changes in the language, the constructs, the attributes, the research still undergirds the update as it did to the current school leader model. And let's look at the next slide, Lee, because I want to get over to the map real quickly here. So the next slide really talks about what I've been leading up to, which is a causal relationship. If you look down at the bottom of that slide, those boxes 1 through 6 represent 6 big categories of leader actions, which we call domains. Those big domains actually influence teacher actions. That's all the stuff that I was talking about with the motivation, the hiring, the setting the right goals, the monitoring, the feedback. So every action that a leader takes, really, it's the if-then. So if a leader does this, then here's the result with the teacher, and then it all goes down to the student achievement. So this causal relationship is critical for us as school leaders to realize really our powerful impact on everyone within a school. So now that we've done the setup and we're ready, let's take a look at the actual map that has been updated really over the past year, but we've been looking at this update ever since the new standards, national standards, were released. So if you're currently using the map, you know that there are 5 domains. But if you're new to Marzano School Leader Evaluation, we've actually expanded, even though there will be less elements or indicators, we've actually expanded to 6 domains. So I want to walk you through the domains. Domains, as I just loosely define them in my everyday conversation, domains are big areas of responsibility that I, as a school leader, have to constantly be focused on. So domain 1 as a school leader Am I constantly focused on a data-driven focus to improve my school? So within a domain, there are elements, and the elements, some people like to call them indicators. Some people, they're actually the standards. But I just use the good old word, and Bob does, the element. So an element is kind of those questions that I would ask myself. So what am I doing as a school leader to ensure that all the appropriate use of data is being used to help me develop the most important critical goals focused on improving student achievement? So that's kind of the most simplistic process to use this model, is that we actually create a large domain, and then we take those key performance indicators or those standards that would show that you actually are competent within this domain, because it is a competency-based model. And your goal is by the end of the year to be able to demonstrate through results that you have attained the competency for each of these standards. So if you look at domain 2, it has kind of a large title. It's all about teaching instruction of a viable and guaranteed curriculum. So this is what I like to call the curriculum instruction domain. As a school leader, I have to have a clear vision for how teaching and learning is going to take place in my building. And this domain addresses teaching and learning. Now, if you are currently using the school evaluation model, you're going to say, oh, Bev, wait a minute, a guaranteed viable curriculum used to be its own domain 3. You are correct. In this update, it was so hard to disaggregate teaching and learning that we've put it together. You also notice that now it says a viable and guaranteed curriculum. And even though Dr. Marzano coined that word guaranteed and viable, we've actually just changed the order so that first you need that viable curriculum. Everybody has time to teach it. It's focused on the most critical elements. And then we'll guarantee that everybody has an opportunity to learn it. So other than the word order, nothing has changed. So that's your teaching and learning responsibility as a school leader. The next domain, if you're familiar with our model, is a new domain. And it actually is just an outgrowth of the old domain 2 and 3. This looks as my responsibility as a school leader to continually grow everybody. I have to get my teachers better, but I also have to get staff better because it takes the whole organization to really support student achievement. So this domain actually takes some of the old elements that were in the prior domain 2, and it's divided them out a little bit and broadened them to talk about all staff that works at the school. So we're really excited about this domain. It also helps, it really aligns very clearly with the new professional educator standards, because again, it's the school working as a whole and how we develop people to maximize every opportunity for everyone in the school. So as part of this roadmap, the domains on the front are really looking at what I'm going to say, your goals, curriculum instruction, and professional development. Then if we look at, if you have a map, it's actually on the flip side of the map, there are 3 more domains. And these domains, they kind of shift a little bit, and they really look at more your organizational management. How do you manage your organization? If you look at domain 4, is your organization a community of care and collaboration? And again, this was very similar to what was in the original model, but an update to the language, a lot more aligned to the national standards. But in reality, it's the work that we've all been doing or trying to do, where our school is very inclusive. And this is, if you look down there, if you have a map and you look at those elements 3 and 4, you see some terms that were perhaps not in the other map as clear, like the school leader has to ensure equity in a child-centered school, but you still have to have input. you have to acknowledge and celebrate the diversity and the cultures of the students within your school. So it has become a more inclusive domain, and it really focuses on how we care. But it also is still about professional learning communities, that we take input from our staff, that we set up professional learning communities where teachers work together, grow together, plan lessons together, look at data together. So none of that has gone away, but again, it's taken a broader view and a little more inclusive. And we'd like to say that this really does focus on the organizational management of a school leader, whereas those first three elements were a lot more in your instructional leadership. The title for Domain 5 has also been updated. It used to be about the climate, and it still is about the climate. Your climate is how it feels in your school, where your core values are about how it feels in your school too. So in this domain, this is all about the leader. This is about, is the leader transparent? Do they communicate effectively? Does the leader have the trust of the school and the staff and the community? And is the school leader, do they ensure that the school is perceived as safe? And that's a really big topic. If you're familiar with the prior model, we had multiple elements about safety, but all of those indicators about safety are still embedded within the sample evidences, which I'm going to show in just a second. So they haven't gone away, because safety it's at a critical mass right now. But in addition to safety, we also have to be culturally responsive. So this really talks about our core values. The last domain, which is a new domain, but it's just an expanded domain. It was in the prior model, but it wasn't in 3 distinct elements. And this is where we took that feedback from the field that, hey, Bev and Bob, we need to be able to provide growth opportunities, give very specific feedback on resource management, because many of us who are directing schools or in leadership positions at the district that actually give money to schools, we have to have a lot of accountability. So this domain 6 actually looks a little more closely at how you manage your resources. And it's not just money, it's all the processes at your school. And you know, if you look down at the last element, this is all those compliance things that you have to comply with: district, state, federal mandates, regulations. And those were not as clearly delineated in the legacy model, because it was a little more focused on just instructional. And in order to really be viable and to give leaders the feedback they need to grow to be the total school leader package, we actually broadened this model just a bit to look not just as instructional leadership, but also at what I would like to term these organizational kinds of pieces. So how is the model actually structured? Lee, let's look at that next slide. Because again, nothing has changed. We still have the domains, which are those big categories. We still have elements, which are those components of each domain. But what I'm using this slide for is that I want to talk about the other really important piece, that for every element in this model, there is a protocol. And it's, to me, it's like the best piece of information. I like to call it, it's my best friend, because if I'm evaluating a school leader, I need this protocol to help guide me. If I'm a school leader who is going to be evaluated, this is my procedural guide. This helps me know samples and gives me like a menu of choices. So let's look at this protocol and break it down just a little bit. So I'm going to ask you to go ahead and put the whole thing up there, Lee. What you see at the top of that is actually the element statement. But for every action, which is the element statement that a school leader performs, there should be a desired effect, is Dr. Marzano's word for there should be a desired outcome, a desired result. If you have read our current School Leadership for Results book, we really go into detail about desired effect. There will be a second edition which aligns to this model coming out in late August, and it's going to be school leadership for results, but it will be a focused model because it's all about drilling down and getting the right focus. So the next part of this protocol is the scale, and we use a common scale in any of our models. So this scale actually takes the leader's actions from not using at a 0 all the way up to innovating or exceeding expectations. So the scale is something that is common for all 21 elements in this model, and only the verbiage changes to match the actions in the actual element, but the scale remains static, and that's very important, especially if you're trying to learn all of this and you're developing a common language. The last part of that protocol that is so critical is actually sample evidences. And sample evidences were never intended to be, what I'm going to say, just individual indicators. Many of these represent large categories of behaviors. And so that if you have programs, you have specific things to your school, we rarely find anything that does not fit within the scope of one of these sample evidences. But these evidences, they're not here to say, oh, a school leader has to do all of these. They're like a menu that you actually, as the supervisor of a principal or the principal, or even sometimes at a district, they decide which ones are going to be required, which ones are for growth. So this is one of the things that over the course of the last 5 years and working in the field and gathering a lot of input, we have expanded this body of evidence significantly. But again, Bob has a saying that I agree with. You always adopt, and then through your HR MD plan, you can actually expand your evidences or make this more explicit. This is a national model. It's a framework that through your own HR plans, you can actually personalize it to say that we want to require this, this, and this. So if we talk about that we are an evidence-based model, let's go to that next slide, Lee, and talk about it. I'm sorry, go ahead and go to the next one because I kind of already did the scale. So what is an evidence-based model? Well, an evidence-based model says that this is no longer subjective. It's really very objective because all of the indicators, now Lee, go back up to that scale for a second. All of those indicators on this scale are actually supported by this body of evidence. So now go back to the other slide, Lee. So what are those sources of evidence? That's the beauty. They can be anything, I'll make it up, from your school newsletter to your community meeting. It all depends on what the element is. There is another word that always comes from people that are learning about the model, because almost every element says the school leader has to ensure. Well, ensure doesn't mean you necessarily have to do all of the actions yourself, but we know that the buck stops on our desk if we're a principal. So we have to ensure it happens, whether we're working through our assistant principal, through a coach, through our teachers, or doing it ourselves. We have to ensure that all of these actions actually happen. But it doesn't mean that you have to necessarily do every action yourself, which I usually get a big collective sigh of relief, because the responsibilities are tremendous on school leaders. So what does the evidence help us obtain? Actually, those evidences should be focused on, as a school leader, helping me get my results. You know, I sometimes think back that I wish I could have a do-over, because I know that I did all of the actions that were expected, required, but sometimes I think back, was I really focused enough to make sure that I was getting the results and I was measuring the results, I was using the results of my actions? So that is one of the things that I think that you as school leaders and as supervisors of school leaders will absolutely find this elevates your thinking about leadership, because you're constantly looking. So I did this action in the element statement. So now how do I show that I'm getting the desired results? How do I know that I have evidence to say, hey, all my hard work is paying off? And that is, to me, one of the exciting things, is this shift to look at results, not just on my actions, because I can show you I can do it, but let's see if it's working. So that's, there is training to support if you decide you want to implement this model. It's really straightforward. It's a one-day training that where you can put your supervisors of principals, your district people, and principals all in the meeting together, so that they're all hearing, making decisions, talking, and deepening their understanding about what results are we expecting, what are we looking for. So let's look at the next slide, Lee, because time is going quickly and I want you to have time to do your eye observation demo. So the last little piece that I like to talk about is scoring, because scoring of a school leader model, we recommend that it be based on competency, that it should be growth, that you should be able all year long to gather evidence, to work formatively, to have, if you're a supervisor of principals, to have conferences with your principals, talk with them, or look at evidence. But really, it's that end of the year, your competency. Show me that all year long you've gathered evidence to show you that I am competent in this element. Then to get the one final score that sometimes you have to submit to your state or other kinds of compliance things, you would take those 21 elements and just average those together to get you a final one score of, let's make it up, a 3, a 3.5, a 2, whatever it would be. So, and again, this we would go deeper into the training. We don't recommend averaging, because averaging takes away that growth. It says if I started out at the beginning of the year and I'm just learning how to do this, I'm new, and I get a low score, well, that low score is really going to penalize me all year long. Our whole purpose is to grow leaders and then evaluate, did you grow and get better? So again, scoring, all we do is recommend. The final decisions are made by the district, but this hasn't changed. This was exactly how we recommended scoring with the legacy model. So my final slide is to say that there is power in alignment. When you use aligned systems, for example, if you're currently using the Marzano teacher evaluation system, the focused evaluation system, it only, I mean, in a transparent system, it only makes sense that you would move to this school leader focused model, or the district leader. If you don't use any of the Marzano evaluation models and you really are looking for a robust school leader model that will actually help align all of the indicators you see on this slide, then I believe that you're going to embrace the Marzano school leader model. So with that, and if you have questions that you've thought of as I was very quickly going through this presentation, you can type them in while Lee's doing his presentation. No, I'm just teasing Lee. And send them in, and at the end, we try to save about 5-7 minutes to take questions and respond, since we can't have an interactive with a couple hundred people here. All right, Mr. Manley, let's talk about eye observation and how we can move into the 21st century schoolhouse and not use paper or pencil, but use this platform that makes life very easy.
Absolutely. Thank you, Bev, for that explanation and unpacking the school leader model. That was fantastic. And as Beverly mentioned, this is the portal that we use. It really operationalizes the model, and this is one of 4 models that we support for all levels of a district. So the teacher model, the non-classroom instructional support, school leader, and district leader. So a couple of things, Bev, as you're talking and as I'm logging in here, that that stood out to me, and that's very helpful in the white paper that that we have. That you should have a copy. If you don't see it, please please let me know, and we'll get that to you. But a couple of things. One is an interesting passage in the white paper on instructional leadership and operational leadership, and how those two mesh together, and how the model really helps in those areas. And the other thing that stood out to me, and that was a great explanation, comparison and contrast with the existing model that's been in place for a few years now. But that white paper delves deeper and mentions some of the things that you mentioned regarding, well, where did this go and what was combined. So that for those of you in the audience that have used that model or you're currently using the current model, that will be helpful as you have those questions within your district. Well, where did this go? Where did this, why is this domain different, and how did the number of elements shift? So that is that's a helpful resource.
Thank you, Lee, because that is free and they can download it at the marzanocenter.com. I totally forgot about talking about the white paper, but it's really a great guide. If you're thinking about making a decision, read that white paper. I think it'll help you make your decision very quickly and see the rationale. But thank you for pointing that out. I forgot all about the white paper.
Sure. So this is, I'm at the home screen here. And what I'm going to show you is what it looks like to conduct an observation. And you're going to see the map, and I'm going to show you the protocols. But this is, if you haven't seen iObservation, this is web-based. So everyone has a login. Everyone can go into the resource library here. That oh gosh, now we've got somewhere in the neighborhood of 400 to 500 resources that are available. They can be easily shared across the school or district. So I'm going to conduct an observation, and I'm going to choose my school leader here,
So
Frida West.
The supervisor of principals would be the one that would conduct this observation, right?
Yes.
Okay, okay.
So I chose the focused school leader evaluation model. And a couple of things as you're looking at this, this is the map in electronic format, the map that Beverly just unpacked in the slides. So each of these is a hyperlink that takes you to the protocol page, and you, depending on your implementation, and Beverly mentioned that we work individually with districts in the implementation of the model, in the training, and helping you with those decisions in terms of the scoring that's rolled out to your district. So you'll notice this right here, this bullseye. So many times, Bev, and you can maybe speak to this in terms of the implementation. A district will score school leaders on multiple elements, but this bullseye here is one where the school leader has done a self-assessment and has chosen this as their growth area or growth plan, if you will. And that is a deliberate, that's under the realm of deliberate practice, where they choose this specific element and saying, I want to get better in this. It's something that I feel that I'm not doing, or maybe I'm at the beginning level, but I can enter in a series of action steps that in how exactly I'm going to improve on that. And then we meet together and review the action steps, look at the evidences and the artifacts, and chart my growth during the school year for that. So let's go into this. domain 2, element 1, school leader provides clear vision for how instruction should be addressed in the school. And just as Beverly mentioned in the slides, you see the desired effects. Pretty straightforward. Teachers use the instructional model. I see the evidences here. Again, these are sample evidences, and these can be checked within eye observation. And as I'm observing or have conferences or meetings with school leaders, we can talk about the expectations around these evidences and what they would look like. Beverly mentioned the scale, and you see that here from not using to innovating. And I can also, if I don't remember, well, what is the language for developing, for example, I can see that here in the scale. I can even print this out. You see here in this button if I want to. So to score, I can simply select a level, and then I can enter in comments in maybe my periodic meetings with a particular school leader, some comments and how they're progressing and how they might get to the next level on the scale to applying.
Lee, may I interject something here?
Sure.
As I talk with school leaders and their supervisors around the country, the feedback that I've heard is that most of the time when they're having conferences mid-year, mid-cycle, whatever, that literally they pull these up on their iPads, they sit, they talk through them, they look at their sources of evidence, and it has really not only helped the very collaborative process, but what it does is it focuses people on the work so that it is no longer, well, do you think you're doing this? No, I've got the evidence, let me show you. So that's one of the beauties of this is just right on your iPad. You can flip through. It's not like you're doing teacher observation where you're going back and forth. You can literally converse about this. And again, in training, we would give you some tips and, you can't do all 21 of these elements every time that you sit down to have a conference between district leader and school leader. But anyway, it's really, these protocols help focus you, and having them in eye observation right at your fingertips makes it wonderful.
Yeah, that's a good point, Beverly. And the another thing that I'll mention, you mentioned during the webinar portion in the slides, some of the artifacts. I think you mentioned maybe meetings or something on the district website. You've got an option here to choose an electronic file. So maybe if it's a meeting agenda, maybe if it's a link to your school website, a number of things that you can choose. An electronic file. You can paste in a web link here. Lots of different options in how you can provide feedback to the school leader. So let's go back to table of contents. Now you see a blue star, and this is telling me that where I have been in this particular observation. And this is just formative feedback, because look at this. You see this box here, results count towards annual evaluation. Watch what happens when I click that when I check that box. I'm saying the feedback that I'm leaving here is going to inform the summative evaluation for this particular school leader. And you see these icons come up. So again, as Beverly mentioned about the competency approach to this, and thinking of these as individual competencies, if I am, maybe the school leader has multiple observers, but if they are observed by me or anyone else, the system tracks where they're strong and where they might be challenged. So you see these icons here, and I've got a key that I can click on. So green star, they're doing pretty well. They're currently at applying or above in their summative evaluation on a rolling basis. The gold star, they're at developing or below. And then look at the question mark, no evaluation score. So that's telling me that they have not been scored on this particular element yet. And you see some of those question marks here. So that is that's a nice enhancement. That the feedback that I've gotten from schools has really been positive to show where what a school leader has been observed on, what are some of the things that that they haven't yet, and they can school leaders can see that as well. So I'm going to cancel out of this, and I'm going to briefly show you the what it looks like for the professional growth plan. So for Frida West, she chose, as I showed you earlier, Domain 2, Element 1, clear vision of instruction. She put in her start point at developing, her final goal at applying, and then you see her current level at developing. Every time that she gets a data point, it's tracked here in the table. So she can see exactly how she's progressing. She's got a reflection log. So there's one entry in here so far. What am I learning about the strategy? And then I mentioned earlier action steps. So as a school leader, she chose that, and then she can articulate exactly how I'm going to improve on this. So it's nice because there's a set of action steps that are preloaded that she can choose from. And there's some things that are also she can come up with her on her own. You see, attend a PD day. Bottom one down here is reading a book on 8 phases of growth to instructional rigor. So that's a pretty powerful process. There's element questions in terms of what do you want to, current student or behavior that I want to see as a result of this, growth goals for this element. So this is a powerful process in looking at an individual element as a growth goal. Lastly, I'm going to show you what it looks like from Frida's perspective. So I showed you the screen I was in before as an evaluator. Now this is what she would see. So I'm going to go to my evaluations, and I can view where I stand here. You can see that there's not a score has not been populated yet because the requirements in this particular account have not been met. But you can see the observations so far, and she can open up and view these in a new window to see what exactly the feedback that was received. And then I'll scroll down here and by the domains. Again, in a competency approach, she can see exactly where she stands in terms of scoring for each domain. And then, as Beverly mentioned, those are averaged together to inform a final score. So those are some of the main functions that I just wanted to touch on. And again, we can have a follow-up discussion with your school or district as to how this would be eye observation in particular, how that would be rolled out to your school.
Good job, Leaving.
Sure, I'm going to transition back to the PowerPoint. Because I want to, and please enter your questions as you have questions that come to mind. And I also, Bev, do you want to talk about our conference in June?
Yeah, it's just right around the corner. But Bob will be there. He and I are doing 2 sessions. One about leader evaluation. It'll be very similar to this. We're also doing a presentation on teacher evaluation, and then he's doing another session. It's going to be pretty exciting about student engagement in the classroom. And then Manny Scott will be there. I mean, he is a dynamic. He'll be doing a keynote. So if you haven't registered for the conference, it's pretty much sold out, but I'm sure they'll still find you a seat. But it will be exciting. Every year it's good.
Good. And also, I'll mention there's a special discount code for those of you on the webinar today. It's simply LSI Web, and you can register at buildingexpertise.com and just enter that discount code. You'll see the box. And again, if you have any problem or question on the registration process, we are here to help. So with just a few minutes remaining, Bev, I see a few questions here that that came in. How can we get more in-depth training on the model?
Well, the best way to get more, I was going to say, ask Lee about that.
Yes, I'd be happy to answer that. Beverly mentioned it's a one-day training, and we will follow up with you on that and give you more detail.
It's really interactive and fast-paced. It's professional development. It's not just training on the model, but it's professional development. How do I become a better leader? When we develop that training is our premise. Sure, we're going to teach you about the model, but the whole premise should be, how do I become a better leader? So good. Any other questions out there? Because I can't see them today. For some reason, they're not on my screen.
I'm seeing another good one that I can answer. Can we get information on the district leader evaluation and the teacher evaluation? Absolutely. I will. We will follow up with you on that and get you some help and more information. So I see another question here. In terms of the how difficult is the implementation, Beverly, as it relates to the school leader model? You mentioned that earlier, but that probably would help answer the question.
Well, implementation, here's the beauty of the school leader model. It's typically a non-negotiated. It's a district decision. So if you're considering it now, you can very easily implement it for next fall. And with 1 day of training, that makes it very doable. So again, it's the implementation. I like to say it's just very straightforward. And it's just a matter of making a decision, deciding we're going to do this. We're either going to align our systems or we're going to use the school leader model to drive change with teacher and to get support from the district. So we can help you do that. And after this webinar, if anybody wants to talk to me about specifically about the school leader model, I think there's a place where you can send an email, or it's just bcarbaugh@Learning Sciences. I always get back to people. I love to talk evaluation.
Great, thanks. And I've sat in on some of those trainings, Beverly, and they're fantastic in terms of the for school leaders and really stretching their thinking and talking about different scenarios. It's a very hands-on session that they get a lot out of that. Another question on here, Beverly, in terms of when districts, it's on selecting school leaders, and does this have a bearing on that, or maybe you can speak to that?
That's a good question. If you're a district that's used this model and you are creating a pipeline of future administrators, you definitely can use this model to help you in the selection process. I've seen districts take it and use the model to form their targeted questions that they're going to ask when they interview school leaders. So, I mean, it gives you a wealth of information. So absolutely, you can use this in the selection process.
Okay, fantastic. And another question that I see on here that is on the district leader model. how closely it's asking the relationship in the two, how
Yeah,
closely they.
I see that question. They are very close. They each have 6 domains, and they actually are very closely aligned. But remember, a district leader is there to support. So they're there to support school improvement. They're there to support curriculum and instruction and professional development. So the tone of it is a little bit different. And then on the other 3 domains in district leader, it really looks at the culture, climate, and values of a school district. So they are very tightly coupled and tightly aligned.
Okay, good. And it's we also do training on that as well, correct? On the district leader?
Yeah, we definitely do.
Okay.
Well, Lee, I think this has been a very informative. We've had a great audience, good questions. I see a few more out there, but we may, if we didn't answer your question, we'll contact you personally and answer it, because some of these are better answered individually to your district. But I thank you for coming, and it's almost Memorial Day weekend, so I hope you get to spend a lot of time with family and friends. And we'll catch you on the next webinar, right, Lee?
Absolutely. Thanks, everyone, for joining us, and please let us know how we can help your school or district. So thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.